Welcome to On the Bench. I am your host for this episode, Brendan Sonnone. I'm joined by Chris Nee, Zach Blostein, somewhat off schedule on the bench as we're here to talk about ACC TV negotiations, lawsuit stuff, fun stuff, and then we'll play some
Buyer Sonnone.
I didn't do it right. Buyer Sonnone, sponsored by
The Turner Group.
There we go. Sorry, Colin. We'll have some fun with this episode, but we wanted to be instructive, informative at the top of it here for something that's going to certainly impact the foreseeable future for FSU athletics and probably beyond too, just how important athletics is to the makeup of the athletic department. Obviously athletics is important to the makeup of the athletic department, the entire university is what I was going for. Oh man, we're off to a great start here, and I'm still talking. Real quick, a shout out to our sponsors. I already mentioned the Turner Group. Sorry, Colin, for a rousing start to this. And then as we enter the weekend here on a Friday, it's going to be a rainy Friday night in Tallahassee. I would say go out, buy yourself a nice bottle of Chattanooga whiskey. And a challenge, if you've never tried the rye, I'm going to implore you to give the rye a try. It rhymes. It's delicious. And like if you like bourbon, you haven't tried their rye yet, or you haven't just tried ryes in general, this is one of the best like transitional ryes I can think of. Like legitimately, it is a bourbon drinker's rye. It's sweet. It's got a little bit of the herbliness of a rye, but not too much. So Chattanooga whiskey, other stuff is fantastic, but it's a rye challenge for you guys. All right, Christopher, let's get into it here. FSU, poor you. You're trying to just do like normal football content, recruiting stuff, and there's just always something going on. Although it had been a little bit of a lull. And then here we go. This was a key date coming up on February 1st for the look-in with ESPN and ACC regarding their television contract. A report came out from ESPN, which I know is kind of difficult. That's not a knock on Andrea or David Hale, who I have we all do have a bunch of respect for and friendly with both of them at a pretty high level. But they reported something with basically ACC and ESPN have agreed to extend their terms through the 2036, which was what the look-in was for. It was potentially going to be an opt-out, but there was some confusion or at least murkiness on what that would actually mean if it did happen. It's not going to happen, and the ramifications of that, Chris, and that report seem to be most likely Florida State will remain in the ACC for the foreseeable future with a few key things pending. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so as you said, report by ESPN. ESPN had until February 1st to pick up the option. Had they declined, the partnership would have ended after the 2027 season. So basically, it's a 9-year extension, but it was actually the original contract. But it was sort of a silver bullet moment, some people thought. In reality, it was nothing. ESPN initially declined to comment on it. Later in the day, ESPN and ACC both issued press releases coinciding with one another with comments from, ACC commissioner Jimmy Petronas, ESPN's lead guy there.
It does sound like the name of like a Star Wars, someone who works for, I was going to say the Decepticons, and I'm getting my genres confused. Oh boy, continue.
So in the report by David Hill and Andrea Adelson, the first thing of the day around 9 a.m. yesterday on Thursday, the report cited that with the television deal now settled, which was sort of like the next biggest domino regarding the two, the ACC is now working toward a settlement with Clemson and Florida State that could end those schools' ongoing lawsuits against the conference. Now, with that being said, that's from the ESPN side of it. ESPN writing about ESPN sources telling about an ESPN release.
But ESPN wouldn't comment on it.
Right. FSU and Clemson have not technically commented on that. The most recent things for each of those parties is Clemson and the ACC, I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, decided to further delay in South Carolina. They further delayed what's the word I'm looking for? Help me here, Brendan.
Let's see. They further delayed. So real quick while you gather yourself, I do think there's going to be something today on it's Friday, January 31st. There's some deadline for both Clemson and Florida State in the North Carolina court. So there'll probably be some kind of shuffling of paperwork today.
Deadline for discovery.
Discovery. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the second time now that's been.
Third time, I believe, actually. So there's a degree of that seems like the two sides working together to some level to push things further along. From an FSU and ACC lawsuit perspective, truthfully, it's been stuck on jurisdiction and every single humanly possible appeal of that. It's reached the state of Florida Supreme Court with the ACC pushing it there. with regards to that. It all goes back to the same matter that they argued in Leon County Circuit Court many, many months ago that we dealt with in the District Court of Appeals in two different forms and fashions, and now it's in the state Supreme Court. Sort of similar to FSU in North Carolina, got pushed to the state Supreme Court, and then that one essentially got put on pause. Judge Cooper, Judge Bledsoe, who started the case in North Carolina, is actually now retired. That case has now been moved to a different person, but that case in North Carolina has largely been paused. I mean,
this whole thing's so stupid.
It just speaks to the snail's pace of it all. If you think about it, they've been at this for now 13 months, full 13 months. Started December of 23. Here we are at the end of January 25. With the item that came about yesterday, some of the other stuff was the idea of value adds in quotations, because the ACC loves quotation, value adds. It doesn't specifically talk about the financial impact of value adds, but the idea is probably those that are worth ratings are potentially going to make more money, which would benefit the likes of FSU, Clemson, probably a few other properties. North Carolina comes to mind. Miami this past season would have been somebody that fit into that because I know they had better ratings with a better season. Things of that sort. But it didn't definitively tell you what the financial figure of value adds would be. But belief is that is a way to close the gap that's concerning with the Big Ten and the SEC moving forward revenue-wise. The thing that's wild to me and that I kept coming back to yesterday and all of this is so much of yesterday's like little bit of building a bridge with regards to the value adds, and also the last line in the ESPN story, which was pretty significant. I'll read it in its entirety. Was as part of the settlement, Clemson and Florida State are asking the ACC to agree to reduce penalties for exiting the grant of rights after 2031 when TV contracts for the Big, SEC, and Big 12 are set to expire. As we all know, major part of the court battle has been the grant of rights and the fee for that, not the exit fee, not the we're leaving the conference fee, the fee to get your media rights to be able to go shop them and go somewhere else. And currently that's an enormous amount of money. 2031, it will be reduced either which way because the span that's remaining is 2031 to 2036. The other belief with 2030, 2031, that time range, is that the potential of a Power 2 or Power 4 breakaway completely is a reality. And with new TV contracts for those leagues all coming up, kind of coinciding with one another, the belief is that the landscape's going to dramatically shift and change there. And that's something that's been talked about behind the scenes a lot over the last year. And the fact that that's included in that is interesting to me. Now, again, that is something that FSU and Clemson are asking for the ACC to agree to. Nothing said definitively that they were going to agree to that. So, the idea is that potentially there's settlement coming in the lawsuits. We shall see. Both schools will eventually have to comment on that, or their actions in court will speak to that. There's the idea that brand value is going to be added, which hopefully will close the gap to some degree. But then again, what does brand value in a few $1 million mean? Is it $3 million? Is it $10 million? Where does it land? I go back to the success initiatives, something that's come up in the last 18 or so months with the ACC. I think Clemson, for example, with making the college football playoff, made $4 million additional dollars. That's a success initiative. So brand value is an additional thing to that. And the idea is how much money can that generate specific to certain schools to help them close the gap. For the idea of the gap, we're going to go with 2023 figures here. Let me pull them up real quick for the disparity. So the ACC paid out.
Pulling it up. What should Buyer Sonnone sponsored by? Should I get rid of my Tervis, my ACC championship Tervis?
No, free is still free. Okay. The ACC paid out $44 million per school in 2022-2023. The SEC paid out $51.3, so $7.3 million difference. Big Ten paid out $58 to $60 million per year, is what the last number was. Now the issue there is the gap there isn't huge. It's basically $8 million and $14 to $16 million. That's a much bigger gap than the first one. The issue is the concern is over the next 2 years, the gap basically could increase to roughly $30 million per year between the ACC and those other two properties
every single year. So that starts. Right. I mean, that's figure that FSU construction jump. Yeah, like just for context, FSU's construction on Doak has been north of $100 million.
Yeah, well north.
Well, like that's 3 years. Like that's just 3 years of existing that other programs in the Big Ten and the SEC are able to generate those money from there. Having to grab it from other places. Like it is a significant amount
It irks me that so much of what yesterday brought about in that release and the comments that came within, that's probably some public shopping of what the ACC schools in the league and ESPN have all been discussing behind closed doors here for several months. Is that so much of it's what FSU brought up? I think it was February of 2023 Board of Trustees meeting where Michael Alford, athletic director, vice president for FSU, has the video and showing all these different slides, and it's about the value of different brands within the league, and people scoffed and laughed at it and were pissy about it. But here we are. It took probably $3 to $5 million in court costs, roughly. I know the last time we got a figure for court costs, according to Tallahassee Democrat, I believe it was just north of 3 million. But that was a few months ago, so that number has continued to escalate.
And public relations stuff that you can't quantify.
Yeah.
Like people, like FSU has taken a hit during this process.
I don't get too caught up in that because ultimately the goal is for FSU to make more money and get a better landing spot. I don't know. I don't view yesterday as a win for FSU. I don't necessarily view it as a true loss either. If they are able to get that window moved to 2031, that is a slight win. If they do get more money, that is a slight win. Ultimately, it's not a big win, which is get the hell out of the ACC and go to one of the two leagues that's preeminent leagues in college football, where the money is being pumped and all of the attention is going to go, and where the model is going to veer towards in coming years. And that's still ultimately, in my opinion, the end game. I'm interested with regards to the lawsuits, what happens there. I don't know definitively. I called and asked yesterday, did not get any answers regarding what the plan is with the multiple lawsuits ongoing between two schools in a league in 3 different states and in multiple different courts within each of those states.
If FSU is not ultimately able to leave the ACC, Chris, especially considering the early dialogue from FSU's camp early on in this lawsuit, what would be your take on just how this whole thing unfolded for them?
You mean sort of the bravado that they came out with?
Yeah.
I think that aggravates some people. I think that's one of those things that's gonna irk some people and stick with some people. The cost of being a fan of Florida State, and the cost of being a fan anywhere, but the cost of being a Florida State fan has dramatically increased. And it's going to keep getting passed on to the fan if there's still a gap. There is no way to alleviate that because there has to be more money generated if you're still in the ACC. And I think that's something that's going to be really, really tough for people. If you win, they tend to be a little bit easier to be satisfied. But, we know what we're coming off of from football perspective. We know what hoops is around these parts right now. Baseball, luckily, had a really, really good season last year, and Link seems to have a pretty good squad going into this year that's going to compete at a high level in the league, therefore a high level nationally. So, you got to keep people happy. I think it's a tough time to be a Florida State fan in the sense of the dollars and cents of it all.
What do we think would be – it's tough because we don't know what the terms would be, what the success initiative would be for brand value, right? If
Two
it's
separate things. Don't label them one and the same. Success initiatives are an entirely separate entity than brand value. They're similar in the sense that they're both ways to get further revenue, but they're entirely separate. Success initiatives, it's what they instituted well over a year ago. They talked about
it. And that's on field.
Brand value is what's being introduced with this idea of everything that happened with the February 1 look-in.
So brand value exclusively then would be contingent on TV,
presumably
shares,
eyeballs,
viewership, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is what FSU was arguing and wanting to begin with, and Clemson as well. So one thing that I find interesting in that ESPN reporting, Chris, is they mentioned the fallout of the Pac-12 and was it the Pac-10? Pac-12?
Pac-12. It was Pac-12.
And looking at what Washington State and Oregon State, the Pac-2, what they were kind of left holding and how much their brand value diminished. Now, initially, when FSU was stomping around and saying, hey, our brand value is this, and it is carrying the weight of the ACC along with a couple of other select schools, some of the lesser brands they turned their nose up at it. Because at that point,
Wake Forest was a bunch of assholes about it. Let's not mince words here. Bubba Cunningham, whose brand would definitely leave for the SEC because they would be valued in the SEC, was an asshole about it. Like, don't mince words. Be direct about it. They didn't like that FSU was acting a bit like King Kong, beating their chest and doing those things. And FSU was in a position to do that with the success on the football field at the time this was all occurring, and they did not like it. But the truth is, if FSU and Clemson left the ACC, the half team attachment of Notre Dame would quickly dissolve just with it, because Notre Dame's not going to stick with the ACC.
That was another part of the reporting, was that Notre Dame wants to play Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea of driving brand value.
Yeah.
Because both of those would be
that are interesting. What we're talking about is all connected.
There's 10 or so teams probably in the ACC that have nowhere to go from a financial value standpoint that will be anywhere near.
Yeah, they're in the best situation.
What the ACC is.
So that brings me. So that brings me to the point of, like, I think if the brand value initiative ends up passing in the way that it kind of sounds, that's kind of what they're laying out for us, right? That's what this report is.
It's unequal revenue sharing.
Schools are now open to that.
Argued for in February.
The Wake Forest,
when they went and had the ACC spring meetings, which you were in attendance for, that was part of closed door meetings there. That was discussed deeply, and it was scoffed at by more than half of the league. And all
now,
the league has done.
Those conversations got heated for what it was worth, too. Very heated.
Add Cal and Stanford, which dramatically increases travel budgets and is completely unfair to pretty much every sport under the sun that has to play multiple games in a week, because travel to and from there is just, it kicks your backside. And then you add SMU, who I think was a good value add. I know FSU took a shot at them in the lawsuit and stuff because, well, SMU basically paid for their way through the door, taking out a zero sum, and has some money to do that. But SMU, the location, the dedication to their athletic programs from a financial standpoint, I don't think was a bad ad. But I mean, the league added Cal and Stanford. And I think you would be hard-pressed to find many people, like coaches, ADs, people of that sort in the hierarchy of collegiate athletics in the ACC, who are like, that was a great idea. I'd love to actually hear it. And I'm not talking
the ACC ADs and presidents voted on it or the presidents voted on it to go.
Yeah, because the concern was if you lose Clemson, Florida State, potentially other properties such as North Carolina, who I've always thought is the next one in line after the two that have actually done something, you have to have X amount of teams to make sure that TV contract still has essentially the attachment it has to have from an ESPN standpoint. So Stanford and Cal and SMU was backfilling in case you did truly lose teams at the top. In case the legal battle swung a different direction quickly, and obviously it did not. Never really expected to. Legal battles don't move fast, the wheels of justice and all. But, like, that's why they were at it. But the truth is, like, FSU women's basketball flying to Stanford and Cal for a week is not beneficial to anybody. It's not beneficial to the budget. It's not beneficial to the student athletes, which I know we've destroyed the meaning of that actual word, but it's tough.
Yeah, it was always kind of a fraudulent word.
Like, it's just stupid. And it's what this league decided to do that they thought would add some kind of real value. And the truth is, I think it's devalued the league, if anything.
So if the brand value initiative, not a success initiative, goes through, I think there's going to be a contingent of fans who are Florida State fans who are going to be bitter that FSU is remaining in the ACC no matter what, because of the theatrics, because of no matter what.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the more middle ground real quick.
Yeah.
What would be the number, an annual number that your brand brings in that would make both of you guys feel like, okay, this was a worthwhile endeavor for FSU to go on and a fair compromise? And then, mind you, compromise is everyone's kind of happy and unhappy at the same time. Like, what would be closing the gap somewhat that would make you guys feel okay with the next few years financially?
I'll let Zach answer first because I feel like we've iced him out here a bit.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that, like, FSU higher ups always bring up when they're doing presentations on this is the fact that, like, you know, FSU's brand value in the ACC with the TV revenue is lower considerably compared to, like, a school like Vanderbilt or something in the SEC, which is obviously not a big brand. So I guess, like, something on the, you know, on par with some of the lower echelon teams in those two big leagues. I mean, you got to be able to keep up somehow. And I don't, whether it's with the brand value or the success initiatives, which will be difficult for FSU in the foreseeable future. Like, I think you got to get closer to that number to be, to consider it any sort of a win out of, how much this has costed you from a pure financial standpoint. And obviously, like we talked about, a PR standpoint.
To that point, I think something that's always irked FSU is that if FSU takes their value and places it in the Big Ten currently, or the SEC currently as it's constructed, it's upper half for both of those leagues. The bottom team in that league makes the exact same money as the first team in that league. That league just makes so much damn money that it's great for everybody. The problem in the ACC now with the idea of brand value success initiatives, I think the figure needs to come in around 80 to 85% of the value of who you're competing with is the figure for me, is what I think would be good. The issue is that to probably reach that figure or be in the ballpark of that figure with these ideas of brand value and success initiatives, you have to maximize everything. And I get, like, you should be rewarded for winning. I think that's something that's true. But the truth is, most of college athletics pay system for universities is not constructed that way. So we're creating a rule set in the ACC that's constructed that way, but it's not on par with the rule set of the SEC or the Big Ten. And the idea that you literally have to maximize it every year to be at 80, 85% in this hypothetical, to me, is it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow. Like, it's better than the alternative of making far less. But still, it's like, you got to be happy with what we're giving you. Like, come on. Like, that's not why FSU got in this legal battle. Did FSU move the goalposts and change things and improve their situation? Yes, I think they have, based on the things that came out yesterday and the things that are hypothetically talked about in there about brand value and such. Yes, I think they did. Is it a win? I struggle with that.
All right, that's fair, and we still have to wait and see what it'll look like. Enough of that all goes through, but I think that's a fair way to look at it. Moving on here, let's talk real quick. All right, real quick before we get into Buy or Sonnone, sponsored by
The Turner Group.
I have gotten off my lazy ass, and after December was pretty much focused on coaching search stuff, coaching hires, and the transfer portal stuff, started looking at some of the class of 2025, the late additions. Better late than never is kind of what we're doing. And so I just wanted to, because it all happened so quickly, because we were in different places a lot through December as a group here, I want to talk about a couple of the prominent late ads that Florida State got, get your guys' thoughts on them. I think it's worth discussing here as we start looking forward and setting our attention to FSU in 2025. Two guys who I've looked at so far who I think have the ability to help you some form or fashion, one probably more than the other in 2025. One is Usman Chroma, the other is Tylon Lee. Let's start off by talking about Usman Chroma. I know we've advertised him as being good. We talked about the win that was for Florida State when you flipped him from Georgia on national signing or early signing period. But Chris, let's like Buy or Sonnone.
Buy or Sonnone brought to you by the Turner Group.
Usman Chroma ends up starting at least 6 games as a true freshman.
I think he's I think I will buy. I think he is the best running back on FSU's roster this coming season. If he was here for the spring, I would not blink at answering buy to that. I love Chroma. I said throughout the process, I thought FSU was the best fit for Chroma as far as his primary big ones, Auburn, Georgia, FSU, because of the pass catching ability. I think what FSU is willing to do with their backs in that regard makes him uniquely special to FSU. He's a high-level pass catcher for a running back. His running style is also awesome. I mean, he can do so many things at a very high level. His ability to change direction, his ability to accelerate quickly, his ability to play through contact. He's a really, really impressive complete back. I think I saw you tweet after you did that yesterday, Sonnone, that his running style just struck you as different than pretty much anything you've watched in years, in the sense of it's just unique, and it is. Like, you watch him, and he just stands out. Random people that I know that like high school athletics and are college fans who saw him play in high school, who weren't FSU or Georgia or Auburn fans, had no dog in the fight, would comment, man, like, and these are people that watch a lot of South Georgia ball. The kid stands out. Like, he just grabs your attention. I think he's very, very high level. There's a reason FSU, Auburn, Georgia wanted him. There's a reason Georgia, who loves running the damn football, wanted him. I think Chroma is really, really good. I commented yesterday, and we're about to talk about one of the other guys, that I think Chroma and Wynn were the two best guys on their respective sides of the ball in FSU's class. And to me, Chroma is the guy that's got the most potential because I just think the upside's better than Wynn, even though Wynn's an animal in the middle. I absolutely love him.
Zach, you gave me a good anecdote when I was putting together the scouting report on Chroma, and I think what like stands out is like the style of running Chris mentioned. It is super unique and unorthodox. I had to go back to Roger Craig in the 1980s to like kind of a running style that I thought was somewhat similar. CC Daddy, yeah, that's the username on our Datty, Datty, not Daddy. You can call him Daddy if you want. Because he's so good with scouting stuff. Mentioned Matt Forte. I'm rambling here. Talk about his competitiveness, please, Zach, and help me. Save me from myself. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was up in Tallahassee on one of the official visit weekends. I think it was also a camp weekend this past summer. And Usman Chroma was taking his OV to Florida State. But at the same time, there was a Leonard Hamilton basketball tournament going on over in the practice facility. And Dane and I, on I think one of those days where there wasn't any football stuff going on, we went over to hang out with the team, a coach we knew, and we saw Lee County there, and on Lee County's roster was Usman Chroma, but he obviously couldn't play because when you're on a visit to a school, you're not allowed to compete at an event in that same area on the same day. Well, he showed up anyway, because on the OBs, they typically allow, a couple hours of free time every day. And during that free time, he wanted FSU to drive him over to go watch his team. And he was engaged in the huddle, was clearly itching to get out there. And, I was texting back and forth with him over that next day. And, he thought he had a chance of playing after his OV ended, but the NCAA rules didn't let him. So he was genuinely upset about that. But it was just cool to see. And I mean, he's a guy that, we talked about how unique of a football player he is, but, he played point guard for his high school and super long limbed. So it makes sense why he'd be a good basketball player as well. And, he's just got a competitiveness to him. And just speaking from my experience covering Chroma, I mean, I feel like I've been covering him forever. He's been on the scene since his freshman year. FSU was involved all the way back then. Mike, I talked about this before, but Mike Norvell has told him that he's the recruit that he's seen, the most out of any recruit in his entire coaching career. That just speaks to how long the two sides have been involved with each other. And Chroma's just been a beast from day one. And something I brought up to Brendan, just evaluating his entire high school career, is the fact that he just kept getting better. He kept improving at every aspect of his game, to where
the receiving skills, dude. Like he legitimately went from like 150 receiving yards to 500 to like 7. Like his whole, he became a better player at like playing a completely different position. Premium was like basically a wide receiver and a half, or half a wide receiver as a senior. He was good at it.
Yeah. No, I remember Chris, Dane, and I drove up to see Chroma at his high school. I think that was heading into his senior year. So in the springtime, and he was a monster in the weight room, and just, super unique prospect and really, really nice ad for FSU, just looking back at it.
Yeah, Glenn Schumann of UGA was at Leesburg that day, Lee County, when we were there.
And for people like to know, like level of competition matters. Lee County is a top tier program in South Georgia, and the slate that they play is also really good. And so him having 6,000 yards of total offense over 3 seasons is he's not beating up on a bunch of Brendan Sonnones out there.
Yeah, and this wasn't Derrick Henry where it's like we're going to snap the ball, turn around, and hand it off to you, and you're going to run it like every play. It wasn't that. Like they had a quarterback who is a D1 kid who was a very good athlete. You could throw it at a decent level, but also run it at a high level. Like it was not solely a one-man show.
No, they didn't. Have you seen Derrick Henry talk about how much like he looks back at his high school career and just realizes how his coach basically tried to kill him? Like they
it was crazy. They ran
Ramsey is his high school coach. I know Bobby, great guy. Yeah, but I mean, hey man, if you got Derrick Henry, like Give him the damn ball if you play it. You got a much better chance of winning than if you don't.
And the thing is, Derrick Henry was Derrick Henry from the time he was like he was always Derrick Henry. Like just he was
man-child
from day one. Like when he burst onto the scene, he was every bit of like as
he
big
and
as
Kelvin Rainey visited FSU, and he was really young in high school, and like it was just like, oh my god, like first time seeing him, it's like no way you're as young as you're telling me you are from a football.
It was fun. Yulee was like kind of a newish program at that point.
Smaller area north of Jacksonville as you're heading towards the state line of Georgia. The school wise, like they hadn't really had a guy to my knowledge before.
No, they put him and Kelvin Rainey, if I remember right. I think that was it. It went play tight end at South Carolina, and they just put those two in the backfield together and ran Wildcat with them. It was fun. But Usman Chroma, to put a bow on it, like just such a unique playing style, personality. I mean, go watch some of his blocking clips. Like he cares profoundly. The biggest knocks on his game is one is just it's a odd running style, and I think it'll work, right? Because but it's just different. So that's a variable. I can't even say it's a weakness. You don't see like a ton of like home run speed when you're watching him. But I was talking about this with Dane the other day. He's like, I think that's overblown. His GPS testing has him at 22 mile per hour max.
That's what catapult, right?
I think so. So like
that's Barry Every working his way around South Georgia getting catapult numbers.
It's legit. Catapult's the premier GPS tracker in athletics, not just college athletics. So anyways, like those are the knocks on him. And both of those are like, you're kind of having to dig a little bit to pick apart some things. Next up is Tylon Lee. I want to talk about him. On3 ranked him as a 5-star the other day. We were planning to do something, not like I started this retroactive or retrospective or whatever series, just the me being lazy series to kind of kill some time in the off season. Thought it'd be instructive for listeners, readers, and for myself too, to go back. So we were going to do that next anyways, because I was watching him about 2 weeks ago and doing just like a projected depth chart deal. And I was like, holy crap, like that dude got a lot bigger than the last time I had seen him and was playing at a different clip that I had seen before. And I was like, oh, that might be someone who can help you. Do I think 5 stars is a little bit rich for him? Yeah. Do I think he should be an 89 grade, which 24/7 has him at right now? No, I think he should be a mid-range 90 grade. Chris and I would we settle on 94?
Yeah, you asked me, I said 94, 95. You said you were in the 93, 94 ballpark. I think we landed on 94.
That's the sweet spot. So Zachary, let's talk about like his growth, his development. He's from Pace, which is in the Panhandle, was an Ole Miss flip late in the process. One that didn't get a whole lot of fanfare because of how quietly it happened. Dude, I can't figure out why they weren't in on him this aggressively earlier on in the process.
Okay. Yeah.
For the audio audience,
Zach threw his hands up very quickly on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I can't either. But the one thing I will say is he did have a pretty incredible physical transformation over the course of like the last year of his high school career. I mean, he walked onto FSU's campus as a junior looking like a guy that was going to be a juiced up pass rusher off the edge, just because of how lean he was at that point.
Muscular, but lean.
Yeah.
I thought the 89 grade for him, like the high end 3-star range, made a lot of sense.
Yeah, back then.
What he showed then. Yeah.
But then you look at it was just like he was a completely different prospect as a senior, because he put on what looked like around 40 pounds. He was listed back then at around 240, and I think nowadays he's around, from what I heard this past week, like 285 pounds. So yeah, crazy. I mean, he's a big dude, and FSU was always kind of like iffy on him at the start and was semi-involved. Like he was a plan B target for them for a long time. They never really, heavily recruited him until the final, month or so of his of the process. But man, I mean, you turn on the senior film and it's just crazy to see a guy that big move the way he does in the backfield. And he's like, I mean, even the way, the positions he's lining up at, I mean, you see him working at linebacker, dropping into coverage sometimes. I mean, it's pretty wild. I think he had 40 TFLs as a senior. And, the level of competition isn't great over there, like where he's playing, but I mean, he's doing what you need to do against that level of competition to show that you're a dude. And, I think the most important thing is just the freakish movements for a guy at his size. I think he's measured, around 6'5.5", and, now weighs around 285 pounds. I've been told that there's a high likely chance that he's going to play on the interior. And I think that makes sense for him at the next level, just considering, there's pass rush juice there. But I mean, the way he's put on mass over the last 12 months has, been encouraging. The fact that he can keep that athleticism while being at that weight.
So FSU offered him in June of 2023, and I talked to him that day. I met him and Grant Wise after the camp that day. Grant Wise is a kid who's also a 2026 from the same high school. Very good offensive lineman. Coach Hand was actually in to see him yesterday. So I went and looked, and I'm pretty sure I got updated measurements from Tylon that day. He told me he was 6'5", 225 that day. So that's mid-June of 2023. First time I met him was prior to that, and he was lighter than that. He was probably in the 210, 215 range if I had to guesstimate. So we're talking about, 60, 55 pounds of weight gain. When he came in for his official, I see a lot of these guys a lot, especially Panhandle Florida kids, especially FSU targets that are regulars. I see them a lot. I usually can pick up pretty quickly in the mental Rolodex of who the heck that is when they're walking by me. When he walked by, he was going from the side entrance to the football facility to Legacy Walk.
Real quick, Chris doesn't have a great – yeah, Chris, he doesn't have a good Rolodex in his mind. Chris is robotic with this. It is one of the best real-time skills that I've ever seen anyone in this.
It's like freakishly good to the point where it's like a little worrying just how – like he'll recognize a recruit's grandmother's car and be like, "Oh, that's that kid."
So we
that was just Kobe Howard. I knew Kobe Howard's car really well somehow.
We've called it robotic. This is all meant to be complimentary to Chris.
But he's walking by. He's going from the football facility to Legacy Walk, and the only reason I knew it was him because one, it was all the officials, and two, he was wearing a jacket for his high school. But like physically, I didn't think it was him. I was amazed how much he had just bulked and gotten bigger, and his face had filled out. He just looked monstrous. And I thought, well, damn, like he put on a ton of weight. Like, I wonder how that impacted him. And then we'll get into the film, and I'm like, holy, I've cursed too much today, so I'm going to not do it there. But yeah, the film, you're shocked. I guess I'm shocked knowing the weight gain, the physical transformation in the last 18, 24 months for that kid. Of like, he became a better football player. As he got bigger, he became dramatically better. And he's still explosively quick and fast and aggressive to the point of contact.
I don't know if he lost any like max speed stuff or quickness. And if he did, it was minimal while gaining power. Like his contact, his ability to take contact and be balanced still, I thought got better because I watched the junior stuff pretty closely to prepare for writing about him. And it got better. Like that was the one thing is like, he wouldn't get pushed a ton off track, but he could be a little bit. That's gone now. Like which you hope for at the level of competition and the side. He's playing the high level of competition in Florida, but that Panhandle area is going to be hit or miss. Good team, bad team. Good team, bad team.
There's the Miltons, the Pensacola Catholics, and Navarre's.
Yeah, there's going to be good ones.
There's those, but then there's a lot kind of that are holes. You just might find a kid once in a blue moon at.
He started playing better technically with his hands, like that improved. And to me, like the progress that you saw from a physical perspective. With the weight gain, like the coordination staying the same, the mass he put on, usually that sort of growth you really only see like at a powerhouse college football program when you take a blue chip player and in one like a Reuben Bain or something like that. Like you take a blue chip player at a really good college program, shout out Miami, whatever, Pop-Tart Bowl, and they're able to hit the ground running as a and they just get better because they were able to be in a college program.
Yeah, it's a body transformation photo of day of arrival versus 3, 6, 9, 12 months later. That is. The one thing I'll add about his high school is they do have a great strength and conditioning program. They're a school that really gets after it from a weight room perspective.
Well, clearly, like it's top notch for him to be able to not lose that. So Zach mentioned him playing inside. I think for FSU, I think that's one of the aspects that we want to like knock his ranking, or if you want to diminish it a little bit and say it's in the lower 4-star stuff, is like, is he quite like look like a dominant like top blue chip massive interior defense lineman? Is he a twitchy edge guy, like in a 4-man front? Like he's probably going to be in a very unique role. We mentioned like Milton Williams in the scouting report, who was an undersized prospect out of
You remember
Louisiana.
Tank Carradine?
Who is it? Tank
Tank
Carradine. That's going back all the ways. But
3-4 strong side defensive end type who can play on the edge and get away with it, but also has a physicality to easily slide.
So you know, good coordinators find ways to use those guys because you can create mismatches with them. I say all that because I think FSU, if it's running a 3-man front more often than not, he's perfect for that. Like that's what his body type should be, playing in. So like fit wise, I love it at Florida State. Have you heard anything, Zach, about how he's looked, like what the role is going to be for him as a freshman? Like, is that potentially a thing? I know we're super early on here.
Yeah, so there's only been a few like tour duty workouts so far, but I spoke to some onlookers of those workouts, and I mean, some of this I think is hyperbole, but just someone who watched him thought that he could potentially be like a starter type in his freshman year, and I wouldn't go that far, right? I mean, that's tough to do for a guy in the trenches, but I think he's going to factor heavily into the rotation, at least by the end of the year, end of the 2025 season. And I think at the start, I mean, just the physical makeup, like I think he's ready to compete in the trenches in ACC play. And, I think his role will only grow as the year goes on. But, I mean, they kind of lack depth along the interior and honestly throughout the entire D-line. So I would not be surprised to see him carve out a pretty significant role in his first year.
Okay, let's spend the final 20 minutes of the pod here playing a little buy or Sonnone, shall we? We shall. Buy. All right, let's get into it. So buy or Sonnone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
Basketball. Chris.
Oh yay.
That's it. Just buy or Sonnone basketball.
I think I'm Sonnoning it at this point. The West Coast trip, Cal was a very disappointing outcome. Stanford's a pretty good ball club, so I kind of expected that to be a loss, but again, didn't really care for how they played. And Wednesday night against VTech, first half was abysmal. It's inexcusable. 15 points, 6 shots made, not really having an interest in being there. It's just bad. Like that program's been checked out on, in my opinion, from a university standpoint, and these are the returns we get for that.
Buy or Sonnone, this is from Dynasty Reborn. The schedule in September actually warms up a very nice, warms up. I'm going to read it the way I'm going to read it because I think we have a dropped word here, Dynasty Reborn. The schedule in September actually sets up very nicely into the pivotal Miami game.
Yeah, I mean, you open with Bama, so that's a hell of a contest. But in general, that first month feels like a get your feet under you kind of group of games.
It's a buy. Can I say I'm Sonnoning on just schedule talk in general?
I mean, I don't know what the hell the team's going to look like.
That's what I'm saying. After last season, what we thought it could
sitting out with 31 new enrollees, 39 new players when it's all said and done. As of right now, possibly, one or two for sure. Zahir Mathis comes to mind, so that's 40. Yeah, I just think it's really super tough to project what you expect a team to be, how they're going to match up to certain opponents. Heck, it's tough to project what the opponents look like because most people have a heavy amount of turnover.
Dynasty Reborn also has a buy or Sonnone. Burgers aren't good for fast food, only sit-down spots. That's a hard Sonnone for me.
You do love a crappy burger.
I do, and I know what it is. We're not saying this is reinventing the wheel here. But just give me a gutter burger, and I'm fine with that. McDonald's all the way. Can't tell me it doesn't taste good. It's salty. It's cheesy. There's sauteed onions on it. It's delicious. Let's see. All right. Well, this kind of goes into it. I think there's a lot of questions here today, guys, where people are wanting prognostications of what the offense or what the team in general is going to look like. We're going to do our best to provide some context, but the caveat for all of this is going to be we don't know for the reasons Chris just outlined. So this is from Knowles 1981, buy or Sonnone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
The roster is capable of winning the ACC.
So no.
I think initial gut feeling Sonnone there for me. I mean, we're trying to forecast an offense with a new quarterback, a number one running back who may be a high school kid in our opinion, 2 top receivers that are going to be new with what Hakeem probably being your next guy up, a new tight end, an entirely new O-line. I don't know what the hell that's going to look like. I know what I think the individual players are worth, but when you put them together and make them into 11 to 18 to 22 guys that have to play together and play 60 to 80 snaps per game, I don't have a clue currently what that's going to look like. I'm not going to act like I do.
So 9 new starters, is that what we're projecting?
Ballpark, yeah, on offense. And defense, entirely new system, dramatically going to change the front 7 of it all.
I mean, I'm gonna buy. Like, I think it is capable of winning it now. Capable and
you think the roster is good enough to win it?
Yeah, I don't think it will for what it is right now. Like, I don't want to say like I'm projecting that because I won't. Most
weren't
likely.
You just telling me that you thought they could win 12 games? Yeah, to me, I think like when you're talking winning the ACC, I mean, we saw what that kind of roster needs to look like, and obviously you still got the spring window for possible additions, but that's usually not very fruitful.
But Zach, I mean, SMU just won, and that's not a great roster. I mean, it was a fine team, but like they just won it. Or no, they came in and they lost to Clemson, but they won the regular season.
Yeah, sweating out the playoffs thing.
Invitational. I mean, if their quarterback doesn't poop himself, like they could have beat Penn State in Happy Valley. Like they were hanging with them too. And it just wasn't like a remarkably great roster. It was good. So I don't think. I mean, Clemson returning what they're going to return, and like that's going to be tough.
Clemson's a really good roster. We know Miami's going to invest in their roster, though. It's going to take a step back without Cam.
Don't say that. You can't say they spend money on their roster.
Everybody spends money on their roster, whatever. To me, SMU's the example of a team that did a real good job coming together. Like the group of guys that were played really well together, and that got them where they got to. Talent-wise, they're probably not better than a handful of teams.
Yeah, and they're well coached.
But they played well, and Rhett Lashley can coach his backside off, in my opinion.
Yeah. We're all shook from what we saw this past year, rightfully so. What happened.
For me, it comes back to quarterback, and I'm not trying to be negative on Tommy Castellanos. I like the kid. I think he's ultra competitive. I think he's going to be good in a Gus Malzahn offense because he's been recruited for it twice. But like, I don't view him as a guy where I think it's a definitive like he's going to lead them to 10 to 12 wins. I just don't feel that way.
That's fair. He hasn't done that in his college career yet. So, and then like there was growth as a passer last year, but like go look at obvious passing downs. Like he still has limitations, and
if the defense was high caliber, where I thought you could get away with that being a deficiency in quotations, then it's different. But the defense is a new scheme, a ton of new players, and
you know what is interesting on the defense is the disconnect of how we're viewing their second level versus how the coaching staff and even James Williams. We were starting to speak to some newcomers. And there have been some good, insightful interviews and some others, not as much, but I digress. I thought James was awesome. He's very, very, very articulate and thoughtful and commands like the podium at a way that you wouldn't expect someone in their early 20s to be able to do so. But he's a Nebraska transfer, obviously very close to Terrence Knighton, calls him more father than father figure. And even Tony White, he's been with him and so understands the scheme and what they're looking at and was big at trying to get people to come like recruiting for the staff as well. I say all that. His comment yesterday stuck out to me. And that was that he's like, no offense to Nebraska. He's like the linebacker depth and the defensive back depth and athleticism we have is at Florida State is different than it was at our previous place. And I think that's been echoed in like people that we've spoke to this offseason of how they're viewing the defense. And I just don't feel the same way about it right now. And I think I speak for you too, that we're kind of skeptical or cautious, I guess maybe is the better word, and how we're viewing the back half of the defense. It's an interesting disconnect that we have with people inside the program right now. And I'm interested to see how that plays out. Yeah.
I will say that just from how the DB group looks, like specifically, like I've heard that, that the staff definitely thinks highly of that group. And we've talked about that. We thought they should have added a DB, at least one in the winter window, just considering the inexperience throughout that group. But there is talent there. It's just, something else that James Williams brought up in his press conference was that experience matters a ton, right? And that's kind of, what helped them a ton with that Nebraska defense, all those guys on the defensive line. Well, a lot of these linebackers and DBs for Florida State this upcoming year are going to be playing huge roles with not a lot of experience in those roles before this season. So that's my biggest gripe is just, I do think you have talent there that is capable of playing winning football, but I don't, I'm not going to buy that you shouldn't go and try and add a veteran piece to the back end of your defense to try and kind of bring other guys along.
I also think it's true on both sides of the ball, but I think for defense, learning to play together is a process. And when it's so many new pieces in a new system, and you open with Alabama, who will probably, do some things to you that really press you defensively, I think it may take a bit of time for them to get there. Even some of the best defenses this place has had in the last 20 years, it took a while for them to get there. We definitely saw that with Jeremy Pruitt, for example, comes to mind immediately, where it took a few games and then it clicked and they were really, really good. And then 2023, I try to forget 2024 like it never happened. That group, as the year progressed, got dramatically better among one another. And obviously it was awesome in the Louisville outing at the end of the year.
Buy or Sonnone, DJ Lundy returns to Florida State. That's just for me. What do we think, Zach?
Yeah. So there's a report by Matt over at War Chant about DJ Lundy, applying for a waiver to play another year. He initially had announced intentions to go to the NFL draft, but I reached out to Lundy after that report and confirmed that is his plan. What I do not have information on is that next step. Is it going to be at FSU if he does get the waiver granted, or is he going to bolt for his last year if that becomes a reality? I'll probably Sonnone it just because, I just think that, we saw what that, that situation was over the past year and just from the portal saga to him returning to the 2020, 4 season, some of that was out of his control, right? He had the injury. But I just, we've seen this kind of situation unfold, like Malik Benson, I think, was earlier this offseason with the JUCO ruling, got another year and decided to spend it elsewhere at Oregon. I could see the same thing happening for DJ Lundy, but in all reality, I don't know what his plans are when it comes to where he'll be playing college football if he's able to.
Can we stop with the waiver insanity already?
I don't think it's stopping anytime soon.
It's so stupid. Turn it into a 5-year clock. When it begins, and when it ends at 5.
I think it's more likely in the next 10 years, we're just going to have 30-year-olds playing college football. I think it's more likely to go in that direction.
And that's not directed at Lundy specifically.
I know
over the whole 9-year, 8-year. Give me a break. It's a 4 to 5 year game at most, and be done with it. Go get a job or go pro.
All right, let's see here. This is from Langston Troll. Buyer, and that's the name. I don't know what to say. Buyer Sonnone, sponsored by. He also shouts out Becky, but was too soon. Moving on. Zahir Mathis will be a Seminole.
Going into the Maryland visit, I feel that way. Yes. Bye.
Also known it just because I think Maryland will pay up to keep him home, like they did with D.D. Holmes, who FSU lost in the transfer portal. Yeah, I don't really understand the philosophy of that coaching staff and up there, but yeah, I mean, Zahir Mathis is a solid player, but he's a ways away from contributing for you on, along the defensive line, especially in that conference. So I think FSU sits in the best spot right now, but he does have that OV to Maryland this upcoming weekend. And I just, from what I've heard, I think they may pay up. So we'll see.
I think their grade should be inverse, by the way. Tylon Lee and Zahir Mathis.
Agreed.
He's a 93 grade. Tylon Lee's an 89. Just flip him.
Yeah. And very different players, obviously. Zahir is more of a pass rush, long, lengthy upside guy. Whereas, Tylon's obviously, we talked about him more filled out at this stage.
So Mathis OV went well. The feedback after that was that FSU was sort of pole position. Mike Norvell went in before the Philadelphia Eagles, not conference championship, but game prior to that, 2 games ago. Went in that morning before the game because he ended up actually going to the game, seeing the FSU guys that were playing in the game. And I was told that went extremely well. This past week, I believe Tony White was up there. I think T Knight was up there too. I know he was up in the Jersey area, so it would make sense that he was part of the visit too. I've not gotten feedback on that one. But yeah, the consistency since, about 15 days ago now has been FSU. Michigan sort of pulled out of it. I don't know the exact reasoning there. I think essentially, down the stretch, it's about focusing money where you got money in spots. If you have spots, and they're focused on Ty Haywood. So I think that may have played a role in the sense of just financials and room left. And UCLA was in there, but fires and things getting rescheduled ended up canceling that out. VTech tried to get in there. I don't think that developed into anything. Maryland is the one bringing them in. Brendan quit.
We lost Brendan.
We lost Brendan forever.
Yeah, it's an interesting recruitment with Mathis. I mean, obviously not a lot of remaining high school guys unsigned in the 25 class. So a lot of teams, poked around there, but it seems the only two that really went all in are the two we talked about, FSU and Maryland.
Sorry, guys. My wife came home and I wanted to get the puppy out of the room before she started barking. Okay. By or Sonnone. This is from Peanut Butter Jones. Great name. The old school FSU logo, the Florida outline with the word state inside of it, needs to be an alternate helmet for a game. That's a hard buy, right? Like that'd be
yeah.
They had more the kind of the yellow goldish, like it's more the mustardy color back there.
I love Sammy Seminole, but I understand why that's never going to make a reappearance.
Yeah, probably not for a while. Well, you never know. FSU Golf 2011 by or Sonnone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
We have more juice on the trail than we ever had in the Norvell era.
I think I'm going to Sonnone. I think there's a new smell bump going on with some new coaches, and they're for the most part working pretty hard getting out there, and a lot of offers are going out. I think the offers is what has people talking that way. But juice, I don't know. It's pretty tough to have juice coming off 2-10.
Yeah, Sonnone. I mean, they were in it for some very, very high level recruits last offseason, and that was probably the height of their recruiting under this staff, just from a momentum and juice standpoint. We're not going to be judging like what the staff's recruiting chops are like right now, right? The first iteration of that, our judgment on that will come after the summer OV period when those early decisions get made, and then ultimately on signing day. But a lot of that is going to be dependent on what happens this upcoming season. So
yeah, there was a point when KJ Bolden was publicly committed. Jeremiah Smith was
privately committed.
There was a time. Whether you believe that was ever going to happen, I know Chris is skeptical, but still, there was a window of a week or two there before snub and whatnot, before the J-Trav injury and things just derailed in so many ways. So I have a hard time saying now.
You can go back and look at June. FSU brought in 19 kids the last week, and they'll end up having 3 of those kids on their team. They brought in 4 kids.
Get them going on this again.
4 kids midweek, got none of them. They brought in 7 on June 14th, and they got none of them. They brought in 9 on June 7th, Chroma being one of those. They got him. They got Lofton. They got Pritchard, Max Redmond out of that group. And Onus was just prior to that basically kicking off that period, and they didn't get him. So the point that I'm making there is like you look at that June visit group, and it was really good. Like it was the way you hope they were trending towards in recruiting. The returns on it were abysmal. And there's a mix of reasons for that. Coaching changes 2-10, financial investment into prospects. Yeah.
By or Sonnone, this is from Fake Momentum. Zach's butterfly wall was better than his kitchen. By. I like the butterfly wall much more.
I don't remember the butterfly wall.
It doesn't have as good of lighting. Like if I had
the lighting that you have right now is fantastic.
It's wonderful. No, I mean, if I had some lighting there, I could really see it being a future destination for.
You just buy a lamp and put it in front of you, like how that's all this is.
I know, but it's like a big wall. I want the butterflies to shine too.
He also asked, in 2025, FSU would put up the third best offensive numbers in its last decade. So for context, the best offense in the last decade was 2022 from a yards per play perspective. That was top 10-ish, I think. And then in 2016, when you had, Dalvin Cook, who, by the way, I did give crap to Dane for comparing the Mariana kid to Dalvin Cook, and then I ended up using Dalvin Cook comp at a certain extent in describing Usman Chroma. So I do need to take some accountability for that. But anyways, that was a top 25 offense in yards per play, and then in 2023, you were top 30 offense in yards per play. So top 30 is basically the cutoff for it to kind of fit into this criteria. It's going to be a top 30 offense nationally.
I'm Sonnoning that.
Yeah, also known as well.
Yeah, you guys are skeptical on the offense.
I think they'll be top half, but I don't think they'll be like among the nation's top 25 offenses, top 30.
I want to see how the five guys blocking up front work together and how it goes.
Yeah, I did see something. Herpan retweeted it today, and it was, and I saw it the other day too. And it was interesting to me. Is it Parker Fleming who put out there basically a graph showing yards before contact versus yards after contact, and not that it's a perfect stat for measuring how well you're blocking it up, because there's a lot of factors that go into it. But yards before contact is a decent indicator of how you're putting running backs in position to make plays. And I think UCF led the country in it last year.
Yeah. Was FSU worse in the country?
FSU was second
worst behind Kent State.
Yeah. Who they play?
Kent State. God bless you.
Who you get to play in week 3 this season. So that's great. That's more Kent States, please. More, no offense to Jim Curry, but more directional A&M schools like East Texas
A&M.
Give me West Missouri Tech. More of it, please. Just all of it. Yeah. So I think the offense, like, top 30 isn't a crazy, if you're able to run the football effectively, and I do think they will. I thought they'd be able to run the football effectively this past year, and they freaking sucked at it. They were awful at it. So you never know. But having a running quarterback combined with the pedigree of the offensive line, not that you have a bunch of like NFL draft pick type of guys, but I mean, these are all solid, like metric based takes who've gone against decent level of competition. I think we'll be okay at it. And if you can do that, and if you marry some explosiveness at wide receiver, and we do like the 2 wide receiver takes. I know there's a lot of variables there, but I think the offense will be competent. And I think you push that top 30 range. So yeah, I'm going to buy. I think the offense will be solid this year. I don't think it'll be great. I think it'll be solid. Last question is from Ninozo. I've been saying
finishing like you began.
A couple of questions like this have kind of fallen into line here. So I'm going to put it, I know there's been multiple buyers to know it's kind of in a similar prompt. So put it all on this one. Buyers to known last year was an aberration.
Aberration. You had it right the first time. You should have stuck with it.
Caused by a perfect storm of weird events like the snub, lost leadership, but Coach Mike Norvell has learned his lesson and is energized. We're climbing again.
Can I go with or?
I know. Yeah, you can, because I think somewhere in the middle.
I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, Mike's energy hasn't changed. There was obviously disappointment and disgust with how last year went for him personally, from him. But I wouldn't say he's changed. Truthfully, I think he's stayed pretty steady Eddie with most of it, with the way he views building a football team. Their ability to climb or improve is going to be wholeheartedly based on how much a bunch of guys can come together very, very quickly. And I know they've had a great deal of transfers throughout the years here, but there's always been sort of a baseline group that they got inserted to. Offensively, that's not the case this year. The offense is a recruited transfer offense. So, for me, it's really tough to know who's going to be the guys that sort of set the baselines for them. I guess Tommy can be, because he has experience with Gus from the year at UCF. So I guess he's a guy that fits into that idea. Obviously, Grenade, which is Randy Pittman's another one that fits into that. Adrian Medley's another one that fits into that. So maybe you have a few guys that can help you in that regard. I just think there's so much that has to come together for them to be a good offense that I don't find the exercise worthwhile in January.
Yeah, it's definitely a remains to be seen thing, but we pick up on things throughout the entirety of the year leading up to a season, and I think there are things that Mike Norvell has improved at when it comes to just running the program overall, and I think there are things that he still needs to improve at. And I think a lot of that is stuff we wrote about heading into that final part of the year. I think the month of November, we took a lot of time to kind of set up what would it take, right, for FSU for Mike Norvell to right the ship and stay here for the long term, and live through a 2-10 season at Florida State. And it's not it's not just a few small fixes that'll make it all right. Like I think it's a multitude of things, and part of that is freeing him up to be able to do more, and put more attention towards other facets of the program, which was the whole thing with Gus Malzahn being brought on as the play caller. But yeah, I mean, from a recruiting standpoint, there are a variety of things that I think still need to be improved, and we'll see if that can happen. And obviously, the recruiting stuff, aside from the portal, is not going to really affect the results of this upcoming season. But if you're looking into the future and let's say they have a mediocre year this upcoming year, I mean, you need to be able to have something to sell, like, hey, like this is what we have coming in, and those taking those steps towards improving in that aspect of program building is going to be vital if he's going to keep his job long term in Tallahassee.
I don't know how to. I think what you just articulated, Zach, was nicely done. I think it kind of paints the unknowns that we're looking at, whether there was real overtures, like real core ethos type of change. I think it is too early to tell and to say. I am looking forward to us sitting down and going over the point by point system that we kind of set out and outlined together in November. I think once we have a little slow time coming up in the next month or so, we'll be able to do that. And maybe that allows to kind of come to some sort of consensus among three of us to kind of feel like we have a good indication of the direction of where they're going. So there's some reasons for optimism. I like some of the things we've seen. To Zach's point, there's some other aspects still that are kind of TBD. Is the recruiting aggressive enough still at a consistent basis? Has the leadership been recalibrated to a point that's sustainable? Is everyone in lockstep in the program like it was a few years ago? Those are all things that are kind of still TBD. So we'll see. I know it's not great podcasting to say we'll see, but that is kind of where we're at with it. And we're coming off of an unprecedented season. So we will see. All right. For Chris Nee, for Zach Blostein, I'm Brendan Sonnone. Thank you to Chattanooga Whiskey as well as the Turner Group. And to everyone for listening, for watching. We appreciate your patronage and your friendship. Bye. We're friends, right, guys?